The rain was relentless that night, hammering against the courthouse windows like an omen. Evelyn Carter sat rigid in her chair, her fingers laced together on the polished oak table. The camera lenses glared at her like unblinking eyes. She could hear the murmurs of the crowd behind her, the hushed whispers of speculation and judgment. Across the room, Daniel Whitmore sat forward in his seat, his knuckles bone-white against the table's edge. His eyes, once those of a grieving father, now of a man consumed by vengeance, bore into her. "Say his name." Daniel's voice was hoarse with restrained fury. "Say my son's name, Evelyn." She swallowed, but the lump in her throat remained. "Jason Whitmore," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "You took everything from me." The cameras zoomed in. The world was watching, and she was about to be buried under the weight of a crime she did not commit. Welcome to Beneath the Surface, where we uncover the stories that were meant to stay hidden. Lies, betrayals, corruption. Because the truth is never what it seems, until you dare to look beneath the surface. Are you ready to uncover the untold? Then stay with us, like and subscribe for more exclusive content. The headline spread like wildfire. Acclaimed author Evelyn Carter, accused of murder in 20-year-old cold case. News anchors dissected the story, podcasters speculated wildly, and social media turned into a battleground of opinions. Some called her a monster, a manipulative woman who had seduced a young man and left him to die. Others questioned the timing. Why now, after 2 decades of silence? Daniel Whitmore had waited 20 years for this moment. Seated in his modest home in upstate New York, he watched the news coverage with a mix of satisfaction and rage. The woman who had haunted his nightmares, the woman responsible for his son's death, was finally facing the world's scrutiny. His hands trembled as he turned up the volume. Jason Whitmore was just 19 when he drowned in Lake Ravendale. A tragic accident, or was it? The news anchor's voice was smooth and practiced. His father, Daniel Whitmore, believes Jason was involved in an illicit relationship with then 30-year-old Evelyn Carter, a married woman and mother. And now, with new evidence surfacing, questions arise about what really happened that night. Daniel scoffed. New evidence? He didn't need evidence. He knew. He had always known. The camera cut to an old photo of Jason, tan, athletic, his blonde hair tousled by the summer wind. A boy with a future, taken too soon. And then they showed her. Evelyn Carter. Even at 50, she still carried an air of elegance, but there was something guarded in her expression, something weary. Ms. Carter has denied all allegations but has yet to provide a full statement. The case, once ruled an accident, is now under investigation once more. Daniel turned off the TV. He didn't care if she denied it. She could run, she could hide, but she wouldn't escape. Not this time. The knock on the door was sharp and deliberate. Evelyn Carter closed her eyes for a brief moment before exhaling. She had been expecting this. When she pulled the door open, 2 detectives stood on her front porch, their badges glinting under the porch light. "Miss Carter, I'm Detective Harris, and this is Detective Lane. We need to ask you a few questions about Jason Whitmore." Evelyn met their gaze, her expression unreadable. That was 20 years ago. Detective Harris nodded. "It was, but new information has come to light. We'd appreciate your cooperation." Evelyn hesitated for only a second before stepping aside. The detectives entered her home, their eyes scanning the space. Minimalist decor, bookshelves lined with her bestsellers, a fireplace with dying embers. Nothing about this house screamed murderer. "Have a seat," she said, gesturing to the couch. Harris sat, but Lane remained standing, arms crossed. "Miss Carter, Daniel Whitmore believes you were involved with his son before his death. He also claims you fled the scene that night. Care to explain?" Evelyn's jaw tightened. She had spent 20 years keeping the past buried. Now it was clawing its way to the surface. "There was no affair," she said evenly. "And I did not kill Jason Whitmore." "But you were there that night," Harris pressed. Evelyn's fingers curled into her palms. "Yes." "And you left." A pause. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Detective Lane leaned forward, her sharp gaze unrelenting. "Why?" Evelyn's pulse pounded in her ears. She had spent years perfecting her silence. But the truth, it had never really left her. It had simply been waiting. "I was protecting my son." The room went still. "From what?" Harris asked, his voice softer now. Evelyn closed her eyes. She could still feel it. Jason's hands on her skin, the weight of his body, the smell of alcohol on his breath. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," she murmured. 20 years ago, Ravendale Lake House. The lake shimmered under the July sun, the air thick with the scent of pine and sunscreen. Laughter rang from the docks where Jason Whitmore stood with his friends, a beer in one hand, his sunglasses reflecting the sky. Evelyn had been at the lake house all summer with her husband and 6-year-old son, Noah. It was meant to be a getaway, a chance to escape the stress of city life. She never expected Jason Whitmore to become part of her story. He had been charming, in the way reckless teenage boys often are, confident, careless, hungry for something just out of reach. She was older, married, and uninterested. But Jason saw her as a challenge. The first time he flirted, she laughed it off. The second time, she warned him. The third time, he cornered her when no one else was around. Evelyn had never told anyone what happened that night, the night Jason took something from her she could never get back. And now, 2 decades later, she was being accused of his murder. Daniel Whitmore sat in his dimly lit study, surrounded by old police reports, newspaper clippings, and photographs of Evelyn Carter. His wife's absence was a ghost in the room. She had died years after Jason. Grief had eaten her alive. She had never accepted the official ruling, accidental drowning. And neither had he. For years, Daniel had tried to move on, but Evelyn's success infuriated him. She was famous, celebrated, living a life his son would never have. It wasn't fair. Jason was a good boy. He had his flaws, everyone did, but he wouldn't have thrown his life away for nothing. Daniel clenched his fists. He had waited long enough. He would make Evelyn Carter pay. The lake was quiet, the sky ink black except for the silver glow of the moon. Evelyn stood on the dock, her arms wrapped around herself, listening to the distant murmur of voices inside the Whitmore Lake House. Noah had fallen asleep hours ago, curled up in his bed after a long day of playing in the water. Her husband, David, was inside, drinking with friends, oblivious to the storm brewing within his wife. Evelyn hadn't been able to shake Jason's presence all summer. He was everywhere, watching her, making suggestive remarks when no one else could hear. She told herself she could handle it, that she was strong, that he was just a boy testing his limits. But she knew better. A sound behind her made her stiffen. "Evelyn." Jason's voice was smooth, lazy, filled with confidence. "Out here, all alone?" She turned slowly, her pulse quickening. Jason stood at the edge of the dock, his tanned skin illuminated by the moonlight, his grin smug and knowing. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. He took a step closer. "Why not? No one's looking for you." Evelyn's stomach twisted. "Go back inside, Jason." He didn't listen. He never did. "You're scared of me," he mused, his head tilting slightly. "Why?" "Because of that night." She inhaled sharply. "That night never happened." Jason chuckled, the sound dark and taunting. "Oh, it happened." His voice dropped. You just don't want to admit it. Her hands curled into fists. Stay away from me. But before she could step back, a sound shattered the stillness. A splash. Panic shot through Evelyn's body. Noah. She turned toward the water, her heart seizing in her chest. A small figure flailed near the dock, the current pulling him farther away. Jason's eyes widened. Shit. Without hesitation, he dove into the water. Evelyn stumbled forward, her vision blurring. Noah! Jason reached her son first, grabbing him with strong arms. Evelyn gasped in relief until she saw Jason struggling. The water was pulling them both under. Jason! She shouted. His head surfaced for a moment, his mouth open in a silent cry for help. Then, he disappeared beneath the water. Evelyn's breath hitched. She couldn't move. Every muscle in her body locked, memories crashing over her like waves. Jason. That night. His hands. His voice. The fear. She stood frozen on the dock, unable to jump in, unable to help. By the time someone else noticed the commotion and ran outside, it was too late. Jason was gone. Noah was safe. And Evelyn had disappeared before anyone could question her. The police station smelled of stale coffee and damp paper. Evelyn sat in the interrogation room, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Across from her, Detective Harris studied her, his fingers drumming lightly against the table. You never reported Jason's attack on you, did you? He asked. Evelyn's jaw clenched. No. Why not? She exhaled slowly, choosing her words carefully. Because he was the town's golden boy. His father was powerful. No one would have believed me. Harris nodded. And when he drowned that night, you ran. Evelyn's stomach twisted. Yes. Because you were afraid? She looked away. Because I froze. Because I watched him drown. Because for one terrible second I thought he deserved it. But she couldn't say that. I was in shock, she whispered. Detective Lane, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. Daniel Whitmore wants you convicted. If we don't find a way to prove what really happened, you could go down for this. Evelyn looked up, her voice steady. Then I guess it's time the truth comes out. Daniel Whitmore waited in the courthouse hallway, his hands clenched into fists. When Evelyn finally emerged from the interrogation room, their eyes locked. You think you're going to get away with it? Daniel spat, his voice shaking with rage. You think the world is going to believe you over my son? Evelyn stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. Your son wasn't who you thought he was. Daniel's nostrils flared. Don't you dare! He hurt me, Evelyn interrupted, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. He attacked me, and I never said a word because I didn't want to ruin his life. I didn't want to drag my family through that nightmare. Daniel's face twisted in denial. You're lying. Evelyn swallowed. I wish I were. For the first time, Daniel faltered. A flicker of doubt crossed his face, but it was gone just as quickly, replaced by anger. This isn't over, he hissed before storming out. Evelyn exhaled shakily. No, it wasn't over. Not yet. Jason Whitmore was never the boy his father thought he was. To the world, he was golden. Star athlete, honor student, the son of a respected businessman. But beneath the surface, there were cracks, fractures no one wanted to see. Jason was a boy who never heard the word no without turning it into a challenge. His trouble started young. Small things at first. A fight in middle school that ended with another boy's nose broken. A stolen bottle of whiskey from a neighbor's liquor cabinet. A teacher who once accused him of cheating, only to mysteriously rescind the claim. Daniel had always dismissed these moments as boys being boys. Jason is headstrong, he'd say. He's a leader. But Jason wasn't a leader. He was a boy who took what he wanted and never faced the consequences. By 17, the whispers had started. A girl from his school, Emily Rogers, had suddenly transferred out of town, her family packing up overnight. No explanation. Just gone. A house party that ended with a girl in tears, though she refused to speak about why. A bar fight at 18 that landed him in jail for a single night before Daniel's influence had him released. Daniel had spent a lifetime rewriting Jason's story, smoothing the rough edges, convincing himself that his son was good. But deep down, he had always known. Daniel Whitmore had built his life on a foundation of grief, and now it was cracking beneath him. For 20 years, he had been certain of one truth. Evelyn Carter was responsible for his son's death. He had clung to that certainty like a lifeline. It had given him purpose. But now there were questions. Questions he didn't want to ask. He sat in his study, the walls lined with framed photos of Jason, smiling, carefree, frozen in time. His fingers trembled as he reached for an old police report, one he had practically memorized. Jason Whitmore, 19, pronounced dead at 1:45 a.m., cause of death. Accidental drowning. Blood alcohol level, 0.13%. Daniel's stomach twisted. He had always ignored that part. The fact that Jason had been drinking, that he had been drunk when he jumped into the lake. Had he really been trying to save Evelyn's son? Or had he been reckless? Or worse, had he been trying to prove something to Evelyn? The thought was unbearable. Daniel reached for the whiskey bottle on his desk, pouring himself a drink with shaking hands. He thought about Emily Rogers, about the girl at the party, about the bruises on Jason's knuckles that he had never explained. Had he really never known? Or had he simply refused to see? The whiskey burned his throat, but it couldn't drown out the truth. His son wasn't a hero. His son was a monster. And Daniel had spent 20 years avenging a lie. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study until dawn, staring at old photos, old reports, old memories warped by the weight of denial. By morning, he wasn't sure who he hated more, Evelyn Carter for telling the truth, or himself for refusing to see it. At exactly 8 a.m., he made his decision. He was going to destroy her anyway, because if he admitted she was right, if he admitted his son was what she claimed, then what had his life meant for the last 20 years? If Jason was a monster, then what did that make him? Daniel Whitmore wasn't ready for that answer, so he did the only thing he knew how to do. He called his lawyer. And the war began. Daniel Whitmore had always been a man who thrived on control. Control over his business, his family, his reputation. But now, control was slipping through his fingers like sand. He sat in his lawyer's office, gripping the armrests of his chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. "You want to file for wrongful death?" his lawyer, Thomas Avery, asked, studying him carefully. Daniel nodded. She ran that night. That alone proves her guilt. Avery sighed, leaning back. "Daniel, this case is old. No forensic evidence, no physical proof. It's going to be hard to make a jury see this the way you do." Daniel's jaw clenched. "I don't care. I want her in court." Avery hesitated. "And if she fights back? If she drags Jason's past into this?" "She won't." Daniel's voice was ice, "because she has something to hide." Avery sighed, rubbing his temples. "All right, but be prepared, Daniel. If she has any skeletons in her closet, we're about to see them." Daniel nodded, but he wasn't worried about her skeletons. He was worried about his sons, because no matter how much he wanted to deny it, the memories had started creeping back in. The bruises on Jason's girlfriends that they never explained. The teachers who had almost reported him but changed their minds after a conversation with Daniel. The whispers at town meetings about Jason being entitled or reckless. Daniel had silenced them all. But now there was no one left to silence, and for the first time in 20 years, he wasn't sure he could win. Evelyn Carter's world had already been shattered once. Now it was crumbling all over again. Her husband, David, stood across the kitchen, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. The silence between them was suffocating. "You lied to me." His voice was calm, but she could hear the storm beneath it. Evelyn swallowed. "David, you never told me." His voice rose, a sharp edge of betrayal slicing through the words. "You never told me there was anything between you and Jason Whitmore." "Because there wasn't," she whispered. David let out a bitter laugh. "Really? Because that's not what the world thinks right now, and that's not what Daniel Whitmore is telling every news station that will listen." Evelyn clenched her fists. "I didn't cheat on you." David's gaze was sharp. "Then why didn't you tell me the truth?" Evelyn looked away. Because the truth would have destroyed them. Because the truth would have made him look at her differently. Because the truth was ugly. She took a shaky breath. "I was raped." David's expression faltered. "What?" She forced herself to meet his gaze. "Jason Whitmore attacked me that summer. I never told anyone. I thought I could move past it. But then, that night at the lake, I saw him drowning, and I froze." Her voice broke, because in that moment, all I could see was him on top of me, and I froze. David took a step back, his face pale. "You're telling me that Jason—" "Yes." Silence. Then, softly, "Evelyn, why didn't you tell me?" Tears burned at the edges of her eyes. "Because I knew what you'd do." David's fists clenched. "I would have killed him." She nodded. "I know." The weight of 20 years settled between them. David looked away, running a hand over his face. "I need time." Evelyn's heart clenched. "David." But he was already walking away. And for the first time she realized that even the truth might not be enough to fix what was broken. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back, their cameras clicking, their pens scratching against notepads. Evelyn sat at the defendant's table, her lawyer murmuring final instructions. Across the room, Daniel Whitmore sat with his legal team, his gaze burning into her. The judge entered. The courtroom hushed, and then the words that sent a chill down her spine. "Mr. Whitmore, you may present your case." Daniel stood, adjusting his suit jacket, and the war for truth began. The trial opened with a storm of media frenzy. Headlines screamed, "Best-selling author or cold-blooded killer." Justice for Jason, a father's fight for the truth. Shocking allegations emerge in Lake House murder trial. Evelyn could barely breathe under the weight of it all. Daniel Whitmore was playing the perfect grieving father. His legal team painted Evelyn as a manipulative woman who had seduced a 19-year-old boy, used him, and then left him to drown. The jury listened, the public watched, and then the first twist. On the fourth day of the trial, a new witness was called. Emily Rogers. The same Emily Rogers who had mysteriously left town 20 years ago. She took the stand, her hands trembling slightly as she looked at Daniel. The prosecutor approached. "Ms. Rogers, do you have any knowledge of Jason Whitmore's behavior before his death?" Emily hesitated, then spoke. "Yes." Her voice was small but clear. "He attacked me." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Daniel's face turned to stone. The prosecutor leaned in. "Can you clarify?" Emily swallowed hard. "I was 16. He cornered me at a party. I told him no. He didn't care." The air in the room was suffocating. "Why didn't you come forward?" Emily's gaze flicked to Daniel. "Because his father made it clear that I'd regret it if I did." Silence. The defense scrambled. Daniel's team objected. But the damage was done. Jason Whitmore was no longer the golden boy. And Daniel? Daniel was now a man who had spent years covering up his son's sins. Daniel fought back the only way he knew how, through the media. His team leaked stories, twisting the trial's narrative. Evelyn Carter manipulated Jason and this so-called victim. Lies and scandal, the desperate attempts to smear Jason Whitmore. A father's fight against false accusations. Public opinion wavered. Talk show hosts debated. Is this a grieving father seeking justice? Or is there something more sinister at play? Social media was a battlefield. Some believed Evelyn. Others saw her as an opportunist. And Daniel? Daniel was unraveling before the world's eyes. Then, the second twist. Evelyn Carter had spent 20 years burying the past. Now, under the harsh fluorescent lights of the courtroom, she was about to exhume it. The prosecutor adjusted his tie and looked at her with something almost like sympathy. "Mrs. Carter, let's go back to the summer of 2003. Can you tell us, in your own words, about your relationship with Jason Whitmore?" The air in the courtroom tightened. Evelyn's hands clenched in her lap. Across the room, Daniel Whitmore watched her like a man waiting for a blade to drop. She took a breath, and then, finally, she spoke. "I was 30 that summer. Jason was 19. Our families had vacation homes near each other by the lake." Her voice wavered, but she forced herself to continue. "He was my friend's son. He was charming, confident, and dangerous in a way I didn't see at first." The words were out now, each syllable like a stone lifted off her chest. The prosecutor nodded. "What do you mean by dangerous?" Evelyn's throat tightened. "He liked to push boundaries, with everyone, but especially with women." Across the room, Daniel shifted in his chair. Evelyn exhaled slowly. "He flirted. He liked making me uncomfortable. He liked seeing what he could get away with. And I ignored it." Her voice cracked slightly. "Because he was just a kid, right? Just a teenager. I thought I was imagining it." The courtroom was silent. "Until the night he proved I wasn't." A murmur rippled through the audience. Evelyn's heartbeat pounded in her ears. The prosecutor's voice softened. "Mrs. Carter, what happened that night?" She gripped the edge of the witness stand. "It was late. My husband had gone into town for something. Noah was asleep in his room. I was alone in the house when Jason showed up at my door." Daniel's breathing had grown heavy. Evelyn continued. "He was drunk. He smelled like beer and cigarettes. I told him he needed to leave, but he just smiled. Said he wanted to talk." Her stomach clenched at the memory. "I should have slammed the door, but I didn't. Because I thought, he's just a kid. Because I thought, I don't want to cause a scene." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Because I didn't think he would hurt me." A single tear slid down her cheek. "But he did." Someone in the audience gasped. Evelyn swallowed back the lump in her throat. "He forced his way inside. He pushed me against the wall. I fought him. I told him no, but he didn't care. He was laughing, telling me I had wanted it all along, that no one would believe me." Daniel's head dipped forward. His hands trembled on the table. The courtroom was frozen. "I don't remember how long it lasted. I just remember the feeling of being nothing, just a body, just a thing to be used." Her voice cracked. "And when it was over, he fixed his clothes, patted my cheek, and told me to lighten up." The words hung in the air, heavy and cruel. The prosecutor gave her a moment. Then he asked the question that had haunted her for 2 decades. "Why didn't you report it?" Evelyn closed her eyes. "When it was over, I sat on the bathroom floor for hours. I thought about calling the police. I thought about telling my husband. But then I thought about what would happen next." She opened her eyes. "If I told, the town would talk. People would whisper, judge, doubt. Why was she alone with him? Why didn't she fight harder? Why didn't she scream?" She turned toward the jury, toward the world. And I thought about my husband, about my son. I knew that if I told the truth, my marriage would never be the same. My son would grow up with a broken family, and I couldn't do that to him. Her gaze dropped, so I cleaned myself up. I locked it away, and I told myself, it never happened. Her voice was barely a whisper now, but it did. Silence. Thick. Stifling. Then a single sound. A choked sob. From Daniel. Evelyn turned to him, and for the first time since the trial began, she saw something in his eyes she had never expected. Not hatred, not rage, shame. Daniel's face was pale, his body rigid, as if he had finally realized the depth of the lie he had lived in for 20 years. The judge cleared his throat. "Do you need a recess, Mr. Whitmore?" Daniel shook his head. His voice was hoarse when he finally spoke. "No." He let out a long, broken breath. "Please, continue." For the first time, Daniel Whitmore didn't want to fight. For the first time, he wanted to listen. And for the first time, Evelyn Carter knew she had finally spoken the truth. Then, the third twist. The prosecution revealed something Daniel never expected. Jason's old phone records, and on them, messages to his friends. Messages from the summer he died. Jason, she thinks she's better than me. She won't say no forever. Jason, bet you $50 I can make her cave. Jason, she'll regret acting like she's untouchable. Evelyn's stomach churned. Daniel's face went white. His son's words, undeniable proof of who he really was. The court fell into silence, and Daniel Whitmore, after 20 years of fighting, felt his world collapse. Daniel didn't speak as he left the courthouse that day. The trial wasn't over yet, but in his heart, he knew. He had been wrong. Jason wasn't the hero. He wasn't the victim. And Daniel had spent 2 decades punishing the wrong person. That night, he sat alone in his house, surrounded by photos of the son he had defended so fiercely. And for the first time, he let himself ask the question he had buried for years. What if Evelyn had let him drown? The thought made him sick, but even worse. He wasn't sure he could blame her. The trial stretched into its 4th week. The media storm raged on, but inside the courtroom, it was all strategy, tension, and shifting power. Daniel Whitmore had come into this battle believing in his righteousness. But now, he sat at the plaintiff's table looking like a man who had aged a decade in days. Evelyn, for the first time in years, sat with her back straight. She was still scared, but she was done running. Her lawyer, Samantha Grayson, stood for closing arguments. She walked toward the jury with measured steps, pausing just enough to let the weight of her words sink in. 20 years ago, Evelyn Carter lost everything. She was attacked. She was silenced. And when the boy who hurt her drowned that night, she was blamed for it. The courtroom was silent. She never sought revenge. She never spoke a word of what Jason Whitmore did to her. She tried to move on. But this man— Samantha turned, pointing straight at Daniel. Made sure she could never escape it. Daniel didn't move. "She is not the villain in this story," Samantha continued. "She is the survivor. And today you have a choice, to let the truth stand or to let the lies win." She sat. The prosecution rested. Daniel's lawyer, Thomas Avery, was good. He was ruthless. He stood, adjusting his cufflinks. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a rewriting of history," he said smoothly. "Evelyn Carter has had 20 years to craft her story. Jason Whitmore is not here to defend himself, and yet suddenly, we're supposed to believe he was a monster?" He turned to the jury, his voice deep and firm. "She ran from the scene that night. She never told her husband. She hid for 20 years. Why? Because guilt does that to people." He let the weight of that hang in the air. Then, in a carefully executed move, he walked over to Daniel and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. This man has lived in grief for 20 years. He lost his son, then he lost his wife. And now he is being asked to lose the truth. Don't let them take that from him. The jury watched, and just like that, the case was in their hands. The jury deliberated for 3 days. The media speculated wildly. Will Evelyn Carter finally face justice? Will Daniel Whitmore get the closure he deserves? On the 3rd day, the jury returned. Evelyn's pulse pounded in her ears as she stood. The foreman read the decision. In the case of Whitmore versus Carter, we find in favor of the defendant. The courtroom erupted. Evelyn exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her lawyer squeezed her hand. Daniel sat motionless. It was over. He had lost. That night, Daniel Whitmore sat alone in his mansion. His empire, his legacy, his reputation, shattered. For the first time, he was forced to sit with the truth. And then his doorbell rang. He wasn't expecting anyone. When he opened it, he found David Carter, Evelyn's husband, standing there. For a moment, neither spoke. Then David said, "There's something you need to see." He handed Daniel a folder. Inside were police documents, autopsy reports. Daniel frowned. "I already have these." David shook his head. "Not this version." Confused, Daniel flipped to the final page, and there, printed in bold black ink, was a note he had never seen before. Cause of death. Drowning. Contributing factor. Head trauma. Daniel's breath caught. Head trauma. He flipped through the pages, his hands shaking. There was a second, more detailed medical report. Jason had not only drowned, he had suffered a blow to the head first, as if he had been hit. Daniel swallowed hard. "What? What does this mean?" he rasped. David's expression was grim. "It means your son didn't just fall into that lake." Daniel's pulse roared in his ears. "You think Evelyn?" David shook his head. "Not Evelyn." He hesitated, then said something that changed everything. "I think my son pushed him." Evelyn hadn't spoken to her son Noah about that night in years. But when she came home that evening, she found him sitting at the kitchen table, an old photo in his hands. A photo of Jason Whitmore. She sat across from him, her heart pounding. "Noah." He didn't look up. "It's true, isn't it?" Evelyn's breath caught. "What?" Noah finally met her gaze. His voice was quiet. "I killed him." Evelyn's world tilted. "Noah, no. I remember now." His voice shook. "I was in the water. I was drowning. He was standing on the dock. He wasn't trying to save me, Mom. He was watching me struggle." Evelyn's chest tightened. And then Noah's hands clenched. Something in me snapped. I don't know how. I don't even know if I meant to. But I grabbed his leg, and he went down. I heard him hit something. And then he was gone. Evelyn's breath came in shallow gasps. Noah was 6 years old that night. She had always believed Jason had gone in after him. But what if he hadn't? What if Noah had pulled him in? What if Jason had never intended to save him? Her mind reeled. For 20 years, she had carried the guilt of Jason's death. But now she knew. Jason hadn't been a hero, and her son hadn't been the helpless child she thought. The truth was far darker than either of them had ever imagined. Evelyn swallowed hard, reaching for Noah's trembling hands. And together, they sat in the dim light of the kitchen, facing a past neither of them had truly understood. Until now. The world moved on. The headlines faded. The media found a new scandal. But for those who had lived it, the truth would never fade. Daniel Whitmore left town. His name would always be remembered, but not for the reasons he had hoped. Evelyn Carter? She kept writing. But for the first time, she wasn't writing fiction. She was writing the truth. Because sometimes the real story isn't the one the world believes. Sometimes it's the one buried beneath the surface. For more gripping true crime stories, comment and subscribe to Beneath the Surface, the dark side of crime, where the truth is never what it seems.